Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome to the Rant Live, December 3rd, Friday. 2 days after the CBA expired. Well, not quite 2 days, I guess, but close to 2 days after the CBA expired. And just a few days removed from the Chicago Cubs signing Marcus Stroman, which was just a little unexpected.
Yeah, especially after I think we had talked about, we had a show Wednesday and said,
yeah, where we're complaining.
Man, I don't think this is gonna. I don't think they're gonna get anybody. And I was like, I don't think they're gonna get Stroman because he's gonna be too expensive. But, to me, the most surprising part, I mean, yes, that they signed him, but I mean, he was projected to be at like 5 to 6 years and well over $100 million. I mean, in the same range as what like Ray and Gossman were able to get. And that, to me, to get him at only 3 years with an opt-out after 2 at a total of $71 million is like, that's a huge coup right there.
How did the Cubs pull that off? I mean, they must have upped their slide, their intro game. You know, the slideshows that they had. And
apparently so. Maybe they had a hologram like they showed to Shohei Ohtani. But I think there's a couple of things with it. I think one of them is, I mean, realistically, like even if he stays all 3 years, which because the third year is lower, it's $25 million apiece for the first 2 years, and then 21 in the third year if he opts in. That's $23.67 million AAV. That's higher than Gossman or Ray. They were at like 22, 21, right? So he's got, and that's a big deal. Like the total amount is a big deal for players, but AAV is like that. That's huge, right? And so if he opts out after 2 years, it's a $25 million AAV, and he's entering his age 30 season, right? And then 31. So he would be going into his age 32 season if he opted out, with the potential to then get another 3 to 4 year deal that would push the total higher than maybe what those other guys get. So I think that's part of his. There was an appeal. I think he wanted to be in Chicago. That's what he was, and he was even saying that prior. So I'm not talking about what he said after he signed, but even beforehand, he spoke with Gordon Whitmire, and there were some other comments that he'd had out there that he made on Twitter even. And I think he wants to be in Chicago, at least for a couple years. And the flip side of that then, right, is that I think they had to have guaranteed him that they were trying to be a contender, because there's no way in hell that some dude who is, again, he needs to win. He wants to win. He's not going to go to a place that they say, yeah, we're really aiming at like 2024, maybe will be, because that's the year he could opt out, right? That he could be done by then. If they're not ready to compete, if they're not trying to compete these next 2 years, he's going to go somewhere else, because I guarantee he could have gotten more money somewhere on a larger deal that was going to plan to compete if they wanted to. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And actually, I think what this does, it does a lot actually for the Cubs. When you think about it, the shorter term deal, and we'll get to Carlos Correa in a minute, but the shorter term deal really sets the Cubs up in a way that, if they're doing well at the trade deadline, they can look to maybe extend Contreras. I don't know if they're going to try to extend Contreras prior to
they better try to early, because man,
they're not going to have any time though.
That sucks. Yeah. Well, that's true.
And so you look at it as a deadline type of thing, and it's like, all right, well, come deadline time, it's kind of the same decision as they made last year, where they don't have as much to trade away. But when you get a guy like Stroman on this type of a deal, he's easy to trade. So that's a possibility, and they may be looking at it exactly like that, to say, hey, if we're not doing well at the deadline, we could flip him for prospects. And I think maybe that's the mindset that they had with this type of a deal. And I think even if they go after Carlos Correa, I would expect to see the same. I know we've talked about him wanting a 10-year deal, but I could see him coming in at maybe 5 years or less at a much higher AAV. Like you're saying,
I don't think it'll happen. I don't think there's any chance. I don't think there's any chance he gets less. He accepts less than 9 years or a record deal. I think he wants a record deal. He wants 341 plus.
But the Cubs aren't offering that. So if the Cubs are in the conversation,
I don't know that they're
it has
not.
to be a different.
I don't know.
You really think they're going to give him a 9 or 10 year deal?
I think they could.
I'd be
surprised. You could add $36 million to the payroll right now, and they'd still be under 150. So it's doable. It is doable.
Listen, I get it from a cap perspective, but I just think it's like a 10-year deal. I mean, look at Pujols. I mean, there's so many examples of like these bad long-term contracts where you just have a guy that's
like
just, you got to keep
years
paying.
old. Correa's only 27. He's 27.
Yeah, but he'll be 37.
37. Yeah, but you're talking about being 37 at the end. That's more than doable. 50. You could still be plenty productive at 37, and even if you're not down toward those latter years, if they win with it, it's just like John Lester, right? Like it was tough to watch at times, and he would show out for like a couple games in a row, but toward the end of the deal. But then you say, well, the first 4 years of it paid for everything else. So if you go hard and you do that, and the other thing is, they've got nothing on the books 3 years out, nothing. Hendricks is gone. Well, I mean, like those things could happen, but we're talking about a situation where it's not as if, you're adding Hayward onto Lester and then throwing Darvish on top of that. And then you've got all these things that are running concurrently. You've got no other big long-term contracts after 24, right? Because after 24, there's no Hayward, there's no Stroman, there's no Hendricks on the books anyway. And so at least what you've got. And theoretically, yeah, will there be some guys coming up? But they're going to be coming into the first years of their arbitration by the time he's, let's say, 32, halfway through it, right? 32, 33, Correa, that is. He's a big-bodied dude, right? Maybe he moves over to third base. But then by that point, you'll easily have gotten, whether it be Kevin Mate or Ed Howard or Christian Hernandez, somebody else is coming up to play shortstop. So there's a lot of stuff they could do. I'm not saying I absolutely believe they will do it. I'm not saying it will happen.
Do you think they should do it?
Yes, I absolutely think they should do it.
Okay. So you think they should sign him to a long-term deal? You're not worried about like injury risk, him aging out, it turning into dead money or anything like that?
I mean, that stuff's all there, but there's no one who you could look at and say, this player is, I will guarantee that this is going to happen with this. There's always risk that's going to be involved. And yes, that is magnified by some of those things. But if you can't play like a big market team in Chicago, then sell the damn thing and move elsewhere onto another business or whatever, right?
I agree with that. I just think a 10-year record-setting deal is like the max, right? I mean, that's like such a far end of the spectrum. I mean, like a 7 or 8 year deal at, a $30 million AAV to me is good enough. I just hate that. I hate those last, 3 to 4 years on a $10 million on a 10-year deal.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're not gonna like it, but that's the cost of playing pool. You know what I mean? Like that's where some of those things have to be done. I mean, you have to accept that if you're going to play it. Otherwise, you're saying we're never going to go get a top free agent, and we are only going to depend upon our own system. I mean, you can look at Bryce Harper with 13 years, and you look at what now. Obviously, Tatis was younger, right? Significantly younger when he got his. And then you look at Corey Seager, right? And the Rangers are tied down to Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. Semien's like 33 or whatever right now. He got a 7-year deal. So to me, you get someone who's
but that's something the Rangers would do,
right? Right. But what I'm saying is,
and not turn out well.
No, and it may not. I mean, it didn't work out well for them with A-Rod. But you're also looking at the potential to have an MVP caliber elite shortstop. And the thing with it is they need an elite shortstop. And God forbid if somebody comes in here and tries to tell me Nico Horner's an elite shortstop, because I will lose my shit. Maybe not completely.
Yeah, but you've got Ed Howard coming up.
We're talking 3 years though. Ed Howard's not going to be up for at least 3 years. What I'm talking about is Marcus Stroman. So you're going to have Marcus Stroman with the 57% ground ball rate, and Kyle Hendricks, who pitches to contact, and Wade Miley, who pitches to contact, and even the guys like even Justin Steele and Adbert Alzolay and a lot of those guys. And Manny Rodriguez is another one. He's not a starter, but Manrod gets a ton of contact. They need an elite defense behind these pitchers. They have to have that. They have to upgrade up the middle. And if they don't, then that's going to crush him with Stroman, because that dude gets grounders like almost nobody's business, and he's low in the zone. He works down there.
Dude, I still don't know who they're. Who's the third baseman? Who's the second? Who's the second?
Pee
baseman?
Weezy. Crip walking Pat Wisdom.
Come on, man.
I mean, who else is going to play there?
Carlos Correa and Patrick Wisdom.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Wisdom's a good defensive player. He was one of the leaders in DRS at third base, and the fact that he only played half a season.
Yeah, but that's not a long-term look.
It doesn't need to be a long-term look for right now, right? Nothing else beyond that needs to be long-term, but you work with that. And then eventually, again, we're looking at, if I look at a 5-year chunk and I say, here's your, those other guys can move up and move off the position. The reason you want to have a bunch of shortstops, Gary Sheffield started out as a shortstop. You want to have a bunch of shortstops so they can move off that. They bring some of those other guys up. Maybe one of them moves over. You know what I mean? One of them maybe bulks up, moves over there.
Does Madrigal move to second?
Oh yeah, Madrigal is a second baseman. Yeah. He's a Lilliputian fella with contact bat. That's the other thing though, is more than anything, even if Nico Horner was like an elite defensive shortstop, which he's not, I think I've expressed this before. It scares the shit out of me to have Nick Madrigal. I almost call him Nick Madrigal and Nico Horner up the middle with zero power. And that's not good. Both of them, like Madrigal hasn't been up long enough, but neither of them has shown the ability to remain healthy. Horner in particular keeps having these little things, and that again, all flukes, all different. Who knows? But that's not a middle infield that I'm comfortable rolling with purely from a defensive standpoint. And Madrigal's had a little bit of struggles there on the south side. I think those correct themselves a little bit. But given their pitchers, if you don't have elite defense up the middle behind them, you're already in trouble. And if these dudes come up and you got Horner and Madrigal in your lineup, you a damn well better have a lot of power somewhere else. And they don't have a lot of that right now. So they need a little bit of help.
They've got guys that could start hitting for power. I mean, if you can get Ian Happ on track, that would help. If you can, get Wilson Contreras swinging the bat well, we got help.
People. We're live on Facebook. Don't say anything nice about Ian Happ.
Okay,
they don't like that.
But we've seen stretches where Ian Happ is an elite offensive player, not offensive but offensive, and he can be offensive. Sometimes his offense
offensive to the eyes.
Yeah. And so there's the possibility there, but you do feel, obviously a guy like Carlos Correa would be another big bat in the lineup. And you really need that. He's not a huge bat.
And he's a high contact hitter too.
Yeah.
His bat is not maybe as good overall as Seager's, but we're talking under 20% strikeout. So, definitely better than what the Cubs have traditionally seen over the last few years.
Yeah. And so it could be very interesting. And the other thing that I think that works in the Cubs' favor is, obviously they signed Stroman going into the CBA lockout. And now they're in a position where it's kind of just wait and see. And we're going to have both, the sides kind of go back and forth with each other. But, the shortened time frame where teams will be able to sign other players is going to, I think, possibly work in the advantage of the Cubs to sign Carlos Correa, because he's going to want to get something done pretty quickly. I would think, especially if the lockout lasts into February, which I would highly expect it to do. I don't see him wanting to not have something locked up and be in camp with a team as soon as possible. And so that might work in the Cubs' favor, if he's not getting the offers that you kind of would expect he's going to get. They said the Yankees and the Cubs were the two favorites there. Two teams that I think at the beginning of all of this weren't the favorites. And I don't even know how reliable that report was. But at the end of the day, to hear that makes me think that maybe there's a chance the Cubs can get Correa at a less than 10-year deal. Yeah, I believe.
You can believe all you want, and it's entirely possible because, like I said, and it was funny because at first I was like, when the Stroman news first broke, we didn't have the details. It was a while before we had the contract details. And I was like, shit, man, I was wrong. I never thought they'd meet the price that he was reportedly asking for. And then it came out, I was like, wait, nope, I was right after all, because they didn't meet the price that we thought he was asking. Like, that was exactly the deal. Like, what was odd, because I literally had written, like, there's no way in hell they do this unless he wants to pitch in Chicago so bad that he'll take a 3-year deal. Like, I actually wrote that. And I looked back and I was like, holy shit. I was right. Not like not really.
I'm just baffled that they're able to pull that off again. They did it with Jason Hayward. They've done it with other players. And now they've just done it with Marcus Stroman. It's just like, I mean, thank God that summers in Chicago are so amazing.
Right. I mean, and I think that was part of the thing. And all these other guys were moving. I think that was facilitated. Now, you know, and Stroman had to hop on a flight like the night before, get into his physical so he could get it all done in time for to beat the deadline, which, you know, if you think about the last week to really like 2 weeks, but I mean, there have been all these massive signings, and so far there has been nothing to sway me from the idea that the owners used a hard lockout, like leaned on that, knew there was going to be a lockout, publicized that, put it out there, and that we'll see what happens on the back end. But I think Rob Manfred and all the people who are looking at like what kind of hype baseball is getting were licking their chops at how many people were signing and how much baseball was in the news prior to December 1st, after the last several years of there really being zero free agent movement until at best the middle of December, and generally not even into like January until the big, especially with the Harper Machado year where like nothing happened forever. How much do those guys love it? And I still think they obviously they won't admit it, but I think that lockout was as much about leveraging a bunch of hype for baseball as it was anything else so far.
Yeah, and speaking of the lockout, so, you know, it's like we all saw that Major League Baseball scrubbed all the player news and stats and everything from their website. And I'm like, man, they're just handing us being bloggers the golden ticket, right? I mean, it's like, hey, we're not going to have any news about the players, but we will. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty awesome that they did us that favor. But I also thought it was really funny that Trevor Williams just totally with the mock avatar, and he uses it for his own avatar. And then I think not everybody, I don't know, I haven't looked, but I know a lot of other players jumped on board with that. And I thought that was just hilarious because it's like, it really goes to show the gap between the owners and their old school way of thinking, which used to work real well, and the players and their new school way of thinking, which is really the way that most of the younger generation and the younger fans communicate with, with players, with teams that get their news. And it's very clear that the owners really missed the boat on that one.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, and I'll go back and obviously 5 years ago or whatever, 6 years ago now, I think certainly views can be a little bit enlightened, but this is a thing that goes out there. Like when you're billionaires, when you're up in the ivory tower, you generally don't really understand like how normal people do stuff. Like you might have some of the execs might have burner accounts. They can follow some things. Tom Ricketts doesn't have burner. Tom Ricketts not on Twitter, right? He's not following along with that. He's not going on Facebook.
He's not that old.
Right. He's not, obviously.
He's like my age.
But like he's not on there doing any of that stuff. They don't like when and this is I want to say it was before 2015. So 6-7 years ago, they still, but when at Cubs, when the Cubs really became their Twitter account became a real thing, right? Like looking to do some big things and put stuff out there and interact with people. That was something that was facilitated by those social media managers, not by the business side. The business side really did not understand the value that was being created by that Cubs Twitter account, right? And I brought that up at a meeting there in their offices. And I just said, I really want to commend you guys on how you've done this. Now they threw that, and it was what's Kevin's last name? Damn it. I'm not thinking it, but it was
Kevin
before
Nag,
the current.
was it?
Yeah, but
dang it.
Anyway, it was before the current crew, right? And like Crane Kenny was in there and Julian Green, and they're like, oh, and like their ears perked up. I'm like,
good old Julian Green.
You guys don't even understand the value that your own Twitter account has brought and how this. So while they may have a better grasp of that, I guarantee you across the board, Rob Manfred and the owners do not really understand that. The players get it though, and the players have Twitter accounts and TikTok and their own podcasts and video shows or things they can record. They can meet us right where we are as fans and followers of the teams and those who kind of cover them. Whereas the owners, the only way they get information out is leaking it through, they'll give it to Joel Sherman or John Heyman or Ken Rosenthal or somebody like that, right? And all those sound bites end up coming off as condescending and as like, we are presenting this as a series of talking points and we expect you to believe them. The players aren't giving us talking points. They're just flat out saying how they feel. And that's so much easier to relate to as a fan. I think that will eventually, that'll help sway some things, because we talked about it a lot last year where the owners controlled the narrative of those negotiations and the players did not do a very good job. And this is already decidedly different in 2 days. From the way they're handling this. And I think it's a great move on their part, even if it's just Trevor Williams making an unintentional sign of solidarity with his little avatar, right? And they've all picked that up and it's a thing. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I just like seeing the players make the owners look stupid. It's because it's an easy thing to do. It's like we try to do it all day long, but it's far more effective when a player who's got a lot more access to fans directly than we do, throughout all of baseball and not just around one team. So I thought that was very cool. Good for you, Trevor Williams. Who's he with now? Is he still with the Pods? Is it the Mets? Oh, that's right.
Technically,
so many trades.
Well, or at least he was, because the Cubs had him and then they traded him, but then I don't know. Is he still a free agent? It's so weird. Well, speaking of which, did you see that Justin Verlander never officially signed his contract with the Astros? So technically, he's a free agent now. Verlander is supposed to get that 2-year, $50 million deal or whatever, that huge deal with Houston to return. Yeah. Never finalized it.
How does that happen?
I don't know, man. But, now I don't know if that was Houston dragging their feet and be like, shit, did we really want to give him this deal? But so there's that. And then I think about, well, what about someone, there was another one, I think somebody else agreed to a deal. It was like a $7 million deal. Wasn't nearly as big. They agreed to the deal prior to midnight, but they did not get their physical done. So the deal is still pending a physical. They've agreed to it.
Okay.
But what happens if that dude's working out and he blows out his elbow or just has a little tweak at some point during this lockout when he can't negotiate with the team? I mean, we're being honest. I'm sure there's something going on, but like you could be screwed. And that's where it's tough, because now you've got all these guys. If you didn't sign before December 1st, if something happens to you during this winter, especially if you're one of these guys that's into his 30s already, if you happen to miss a year or even just a small amount of time, if you're hurt during this next period when the lockout thaws out, like you could be really screwed. And that's where it gets tough, because in the past,
really,
this is our first, it's the first work stoppage, which really, I find that it's a little bit strange, right? Because nothing really was started. It's just transaction freeze. But the strike in 94, but that was a strike. And even prior to that strike, there was no CBA in place, but the teams and owners, like their players were still able to sign deals. There was no lockout taking place. The last lockout was in 1990. So it's been, we're talking 32 years since there's actually been a lockout. And that's what's decidedly different, is at least before and even prior to December 1st, there was a CBA in place, but nobody knew what the next one was going to be. And so you're really kind of flying blind. And that's what kind of sucks here for the players. And that's why the owners are doing it, is because they have very little security, because they don't know. I mean, if you're not with the team right now, you really kind of biding your time and hope. I mean, you got to take it kind of easy, man. Put it on the bubble wrap or something and hope nothing happens to you between now and whenever it unfreezes. Thaws is the word, but I already used that and I didn't want to sound redundant, but unfreeze sounds really dumb.
Yeah. Rob Manfred, God, it's hard to like any commissioner, to be honest. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like I can remember one that I loved. So they're all kind of shitbags. But Rob Manfred is really good at it. And, just like how he's such I was a fan before I was a commissioner, and I'm speaking from the fans' perspective and blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. Not. You represent the owners 100%. That's the only people you represent. You weren't forced to lock the players out. That's what they said. There's a force. There's nowhere in the CBA that says a lockout is mandatory once the CBA expires. They can continue under the current CBA rules as long as they want, without a new CBA in place. They chose not to do that, and it was the owners who made that decision on their own, and they were not forced. So when I see that and when I hear him say that, I just wonder to myself, is anyone listening to him? I mean, people listen to Donald Trump, so I assume people are actually listening to Rob Manfred.
Oh, I guarantee they do. But like, for him to come out and say that the players had no interest in bargaining, that they weren't being serious, like, what are you talking about? Like, that's just true.
Yeah,
I mean, I've
they don't want to work. They don't want to play baseball anymore. They're done.
I've seen the proposals.
They're going to go do other things.
The last one I saw regarding free agency and stuff was like a scaled deal where the players were actually working toward, and I think it eventually would have been 29 and a half or 5 years or something like that, and it was scaling into like the first year there would have been no change to the free, 6 years, and the next year was like 6 years and 29 and a half or something. It scaled into this to where there was this either or, and I'm like, this seems very reasonable, and like the players are coming to the, like, don't tell me they're unwilling when we can see these reports that are coming out. And that's where the players are doing a better job of it, because before it was like the owners say, well, the players aren't trying to meet us in the middle. Here's what we proposed. They turned it down. And then we don't know what the players proposed. But now we do. I just, like, Manfred, again, he doesn't get it. He just, it is very much the Steve Buscemi meme, where he's in the school and he's got the skateboard over his shoulders, like, how do you do, fellow kids? And that's like Rob Manfred being like, how do you do, fellow baseball fans? Who would like to take in a game of hardball at the old ballpark around the corner? Who would like to go throw the old horsehide around?
Pull up your knickers and let's get going, shall we?
Yeah, it's just like you just
grab your carriage.
Like it actually, you know what else it feels like? It's the other thing is like Rob Manfred trying to relate to people is like Brian Kelly throwing on his Southern accent to address the crowd at the LSU basketball. If you haven't seen this, again, dude, born and raised in Massachusetts, whose whole adult life has been spent in either Michigan, Indiana, or Ohio. 2 days after he gets hired by LSU, is addressing the crowd at a basketball game and saying, my family. It is the best. He's like got a foghorn leghorn going on. But that's what Manfred reminds me of. It's like, you're not convincing anyone unless they were already convinced of whatever it is that you're trying to tell them, which is that players are greedy and they're getting millions of dollars to play a child's game and so on and so forth. So you do have a lot of those fans. And I got taken to task because I wrote about the Trevor Williams thing, and I definitely take the side of the players on this. And there's a very long comment that's as long as its own article following about how I or we need to present the other side of this. I'm like, the fuck I do.
We don't have to be independent. Just FYI, we're a blog.
Right. Like, I don't know. Why would I do that?
Chicago Cubs blog. We're fans.
Right. Like, if somebody comes to me and they said, hey, I feel I would like to write something kind of from the other side of this, then I would allow them to do that. But like, I'm not going to be disingenuous and be like, well, I could see where fans are coming from, because I too have carried water. Like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, if I want my boots licked, I don't want to lick anybody's boots, and I don't need mine licked either. Well, that'd be kind of interesting. But like, if somebody wants to do that and present it, cool, but don't tell me what to write. I just thought that was kind of funny. I'm like, no, I am the editor. I do not need your editorial, not you, but again, feel free to tell me that my writing sucks or you don't like what I wrote, but don't tell me what I need to write. That's a bridge too far.
Yeah, well, good thing he covered it in the comments. So we've got Ethan Roberts, up and comer, heavy fastball, a lot of key. What's he throw, like 97, 98?
He's up there. He's trying to get to 90. I think he's 96. I've seen 96, maybe up to 97 from a little guy. He's not a big dude. It's like 5'10".
Could see him in Chicago next year.
I think it's entirely possible. Yeah. Tons of spin.
He's on the 40 man.
He's got the spin rate record at Vanderbilt University, and he didn't even attend Vanderbilt. He was just there visiting and got into the cage and threw and set their spin rate records there.
Nice.
Super good dude, though. Very much looking forward to talking to him. Especially, he is one of the guys whose face is missing from the. If you go to Cubs.com and check the 40-man roster, you won't see his face there. It's gone.
You won't. But you'll find it. You can find it on Cubs Insider. So just search his name and it'll pop right up.
Check there. You can learn a little bit more about him, and then we'll be talking to him on Monday. So
on Monday, cool. I think he's at 11 East Central.
So what
11 a.m. Central. Something like that.
Maybe I don't remember.
We'll send out a little bit of a notification before we do it, but it'll be around 11 a.m. Central.
I could look it up here to confirm.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was just looking at it and I wrote 11, but
yeah, I think that's what we said.
Yes, 11 a.m. Central Time. Ethan Roberts next Monday. So just after the weekend, everyone, we've got to run, but have yourselves a great weekend, and we'll see you guys all on Monday.
Later.
Bye.